11:10 to 12 o'clock.
Okay.
So yeah, so 50 minutes. You know, we'll put a Q&A at the end if you want, or questions throughout. Whatever.
Sure.
Oh,
Oh,
up to you.
a little of both, frankly.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that you are ready to
Okay.
kick ass.
So we're recording right now.
We are.
Whoa. Okay.
All right. So
We'll trim the front end.
Okay. So that's good. And does this have a pointer in it?
Yeah,
it does.
I'll point
Yeah.
Oh, how neat. Okay, cool. I like it.
So
Nice.
pointer.
Ergonomic.
You feeling comfortable?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I'm fine. Thank you.
You bet.
Here. Before we get started, this will be good. Here. Take a photo. I'm in so few photos because I'm always taking them.
All right. Okay.
Of course, don't run the presentation. Here, there you go.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's good.
Thank you, sir.
I thought it was just one of
Okay, have people been finding this room okay? This is my first visit to this one.
You better not say that too much.
Or Doug, sorry.
What's that?
Doug,
Yeah.
have people been finding this room okay?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
They have been. We'll give them a few more minutes here. It's we have 2 or 3 more minutes. There's a little Pancho Lefty on Facebook. That's sad. He passed away. I got to see him at concert, Bro Haggard, yeah. Back, he was a spec in Chicago. I was working at a concert in Chicago. It was him and Leah Rhymes at that concert. Yeah, you can smell him. He got better. Yeah. Get all kinds of notes and friends.
I see him over there still.
Ready, we've got a pretty good assemblage of people right now, so I think we're going to get started here so we don't run into lunch too deep. Hello, my name's Doug McCarty, Portland State University, longtime Northwest Med member. I have the honor today of introducing another longtime contributor to Northwest Met from Western Washington University, Robert Clark, or as like to be said, Bob Clark. He's done a lot of presentations over the years on video, integrating students into the workplace using video and a bunch of techniques. So with Bob, take it away.
Thank you, Doug. Welcome, welcome. This is one of the rarest pictures in the world. It's a picture of me in action because normally I'm taking the photos. And so I'm always behind the camera. So this is it, but bear with me. I'm either taking the photos or in the production of all the stuff that you're about to see. So recently, and I mean by recently like in January, we got the keys to a new facility upstairs in the building known as Haggard Hall. It's a 900 square foot TV studio that literally was 6 years in the making. And so I'm going to be giving you a brief overview on how we got there, the lessons that we learned along the way. If you have any questions, feel free to ask as we go along. Plus, I'll try to leave some time at the end for questions if you have any. Obviously, this is the type of thing that every one of you, if you went off and tried to do one of these yourself, your experience would be different. But at the same time, I think there's some similarities that we discovered, that some of them are age-old and some of them are new. And in any case, I hope you learned something out of this. So let's get started. We have an overview. We don't have a mission statement yet. I went to the makerspace discussion yesterday, and it was really impressive because essentially what I want us to do is create a mission statement that's similar to a makerspace. Right now, if you go to our website, it doesn't say anything about that, but that's the sort of philosophy, that's the sort of germ of a core value that I'd like to see us develop. But in the meantime, we have this sort of very nuts and bolts sort of description of what we have, which, you know, for what it's worth is very accurate, but still it's not very inspiring. So, starting back in 2009, 3 different deans. We have 7 colleges and a library and a graduate school at Western Washington. 3 different deans from 3 different colleges all came to the same meeting and said, we want a TV studio for our students. Now, of course, what they were talking about was 3 different TV studios for 3 different colleges and 3 different locations. Now, the powers that be went and said, well, you know, we really don't have the money for 3, and we barely have enough money for 1. But they decided to put forth a proposal that said, well, okay, if we had some money, where would we put it, sort of thing. And it's really a cart and horse situation because they weren't going to give us the money until we had somewhere to put it, and they weren't going to design where to put it until they had some money. So finally, fortunately, around 2011, 2012, we found some hidden space. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. And that sort of broke the log jam to getting legislative funding, the design work, which took a year, the building, which took about 9 months, and then the fine-tuning, which is the phase that we're in right now. This is Haggard Hall. I don't know, some of you may have been up to Bellingham for the conference that we had. The area that we're talking about is this subsection here, and for those on radio, you can't see what I'm doing. I'm pointing at the screen. This used to be the print shop. This used to be a computer lab. Through some creative architecture, we found out that directly above part of the print shop and the computer lab was this huge area because the room above it had been built with a concrete stair-stepped floor, and subsequently as the room, as you went towards the north, essentially, you got this higher and higher ceiling. Now, when they had developed the computer lab, they just covered that over, and all of this was empty space. So the campus architects came along and said, hey, could you use this as a TV studio? You're always complaining about needing height for lights, needing concrete for sound protection, and, you know, basically having something that's centrally located. This is centrally located. It's got some height. And could you use it? And we were like, well, it would be nice if it were a complete square, if you had the entire area, but sure, in deference to nothing, I guess we'll make it work. And actually, it's worked out kind of neat because we took that area of space in the middle that you were just looking at and actually increased it a little bit and said, well, yeah, I mean, if you have the cameras over here and you're shooting in this direction and your highest part of the ceiling is on the right-hand side, you could actually make it work. And by doing some drawings and design work, we felt pretty comfortable that it not only would be a usable space, but that people really wouldn't notice the missing part of the ceiling that was over here once we finished with it. So, lesson number 1. In the midst of all of this euphoria about finding a possible space, about finding possible money, about finding, all these different possible things, we had to get buy-in as early as possible from 7 colleges, a library, the graduate school, various administrative areas, my area, and the architects, seriously, we had our first meeting, our first design group meeting, I think there were 40 people there. And seriously, in a great good news, bad news sort of situation, everyone from the college was represented. Unfortunately, everybody from the college was represented. And subsequently, the meetings took a while to get that sort of focus. Initially, this was always going to be a very faculty and student-driven process, but part of the challenge was maintaining the faculty input throughout the length of the process, because those 40-person meetings went down to 30-person meetings, and then they ended up at 20-person meetings. People were still being invited, all 40 were still being invited, but they weren't able to attend, and as we got fewer and fewer faculty and students attending, we were at risk of losing that buy-in, that motivation, and so we really had to reach out to people to, even outside of meetings, to say, okay, come on, I know you can't make the meeting, but give me your thoughts at least so I can bring them to the meeting on your behalf, that sort of thing. By the way, this little drawing is of just one chunk of the university's hierarchy. This is the Learning Commons that we're a part of, and as you can tell, it's got at least 12 groups in it. It's really a mishmash in a hierarchical format. We're down here, but for what it's worth, we're still a junior partner of this whole endeavor. We're starting small, but hopefully we'll get bigger soon. This is a photo of the current space that you may have seen if you came up to Bellingham. This is Haggard Hall 113. This is the outer office, and we have just a normal 20-person class coming in to do a production in the old facility. Now, part of the challenge with the old facility was we lost about half of the square footage when we designed it. So in designing the new facility, we deliberately tried to emphasize teaching areas. We deliberately tried to emphasize the fact that you would have 20 students with backpacks and computers and blah, 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 and set it up so that you could take cohorts, a group of 6 students at the computers, a group of 6 students watching them, a separate group of 6 students in the studio, a separate group of 6 students watching them, and manage all of that. And so this is one of the early sketches. By the way, this was done on a smart board. It was like the first time that I'd ever actually used a smart board in its true purpose. And so I don't know if anybody's from Smart is here, but this was really a learning moment for me, by the way, just myself. And as you can tell, this sort of thing over here, this was going to be a separate computer lab, but it was also going to be designed as a collaborative space. We didn't get enough money for this, so this stayed as the computer lab with the same old furniture it had before, but it's still a part of the DMC, and in a separate phase later on, we'd like to see this brought back into a collaborative space and actually more storage for sets, which we didn't get, and some other stuff. So anyway, prepare to deal with budgets. So, as I mentioned, we had to think creatively, and again, for the folks that are watching this, you're not going to see this so well. We ended up with a 2-tier lighting grid. So grid number 1 is at about 16 feet, and grid number 2 is at about 19 feet. and the grids slightly overlap. I think I have a, well, that's a, here, let's, never mind. I don't have a. It's hard to photograph because it's all black, and it's deliberately done that way, obviously, for a TV studio. But basically, the goal was to have the smaller, shorter grid for some of the lighting, but the taller grid for the main part of the studio as much as possible. And, you know, we worked with a company called Stagecraft down in Seattle, and they were like, really? Oh, you want to do that? And I was like, well, what else are we going to do? We have, otherwise we lose a big chunk of the square footage, and quite frankly, if we have a lower grid, we can still get angles on the lights that are meaningful and have the cameras over here underneath that shorter grid. It did reduce the amount of workable square footage in a sense, but at the same time, we got out of the square footage as much as we could get. So prepare to make trade-offs. That's another good lesson. So here's what it looks like currently. And you'll notice that in contrast to the picture that we showed before, here's a huge group of students having a mock parliamentary debate, and my 3 cameras are over here, and there's still room to maneuver, there's still room to walk around. And likewise in the control room, here's a class coming in, and again, they got all their backpacks and accoutrements and stuff. It still looks crowded. I mean, it's pretty much at max capacity, but it doesn't look as OSHA unapproved as my previous photo did. You know, when my manager would walk by and he'd see literally people standing like this in my office, and he'd be standing, what are you doing? And I'd go, well, I'm having a class, what do you want, you know? Anyway, so how to get to those things. This is some of the stuff that you may already know. If you've ever put a building together or done any of these projects, we developed a really good cooperation with the architects and the installers and the integrators as much as possible. We tried giving them ideas, they tried bouncing ideas off of us, because we were retrofitting a space that hadn't been designed for TV, and in a sense shoehorning it into a space that really wasn't, it was good enough, it was workable, but it required creative solutions. Being on site was critical. The fact that it was in the building I'm already in was very, very helpful. In fact, the fact that you were close to the construction noise was actually a good thing in some ways, because if you heard the construction noise, you knew they were working. And if you didn't hear the construction noise, you went up and, hey, what's wrong? Well, have you been having trouble with parts? Really, what's your trouble with parts? You know, you could actually turn that into a benefit to some extent. My media engineer, Terry Dayton, who's been with the school for like 40-odd years, was invaluable in keeping an eye on the parts that came in, the parts that were supposed to come in and weren't coming in, and the putting together of the parts, and making sure the parts that were being put in weren't being put in too early before the other parts were put in, and so on and so forth. And that sort of detail work requires somebody on the ground, on your team, interfacing with them, because between the contractor and the subcontractor and the installer and the integrator and the designer and the architect and the admin and the fire code and the blah, 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 and the blah, 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 again, it's like managing all the university elements as well, only even more so, frankly. So this is one of the creative solutions I was telling you about. I got this out of order, I apologize. So this is the lower grid drawing. Again, this was done on a whiteboard. I can't tell you how much whiteboard time we spent figuring things out. But basically what we ended up with was both a 2-tiered lighting grid as well as a 2-tiered curtain. And the curtain rail that we put for the background actually has 3 parts to it. This third part we didn't get funding for. So we got a curtain up here and a sort of U-shaped or J-shaped curtain here. But in the future we'd add a third curtain down here as well. But again, we had to make cost-cutting measures as we went along. That's another side lesson. So this is what it looks like under construction. I don't know, you probably know this already. Take photos of your construction process. They come in so handy to show administrators, well, it used to look like this and now it looks like this. And they go, oh my gosh, I see it, I see it. You can see sort of the stair-step nature of the ceiling. And as you can tell, these are like, I don't know, 19-foot ladders or 17-foot ladders. Anyway, it's a pretty decent sized space. And you're more than welcome to come up in Bellingham and tour it in the real life if you're interested. As you can tell, we're going to develop an immersive environment. Again, one of the things that we ran out of money for was the professional green screen that you lay down. But for right now, we're mocking it in and giving people an idea of what it could look like once we start phase 2. And we've already started doing some productions in there. And this picture shows just some students doing a dance presentation. And this is a really low-end green screen effect, basically taking out the green screen and replacing it with a sort of neutral gradated color. And you'll notice that the infinity wall down at the bottom, if it were continued onto the floor, which it isn't, would actually give them a fully immersive environment to dance in that, you know, could be anything. I mean, it could be Paris, it could be Mars, it could be anything. So, in thinking creatively and in looking at this space, the other thing that we were very careful to do was to look into the crystal ball as much as possible and provide a space that would be okay for 4K cameras, even though we aren't buying 4K cameras. That would be okay for digital SLR cameras, even though we weren't installing digital SLR cameras. So we deliberately designed a sound stage as well as a TV studio. So technically it's the same room, but it has more than one function. In fact, it's also a meeting space and a presentation space, so technically it has 4 functions. We did that deliberately as a group, not only to maximize the usage of the space, but to also look at it as, again, a makerspace where you would have that sort of collaborative environment and a flexibility built in to allow the collaborations to take their own organic form. I mean, you basically want to say to students when they actually start using the facility more frequently, sure, we can do that, versus, ooh, wow, that's a great idea. Too bad we didn't design that, you know. So we really tried to think as much as possible, as creatively as possible, including the students, including the faculty in the process, to try and give them the opportunity to dream large and come up with some ideas. So this particular picture, which is of a normal, just 5-person interview, part of the reason why I put that there is because this could be shot using 4K, 3D, sensor vision, telepathy. I mean, it really doesn't matter. You still have 5 people in a quiet environment having a discussion that are well lit, and regardless of the technology you're using to record them, the facility itself, the building, the infrastructure itself, should be able to handle it. So that's part of the future-proofing as much as putting in fiber, frankly, which is another good way to future-proof things. So we've designed the process as much as possible to be user-friendly. Now, TV in and of itself, especially traditional multi-camera TV in a studio, can be really intimidating to people. So we've tried to chunk it down into 6 positions. So for example, you know, in the control room, we try to say, okay, don't worry about the rest of this stuff, just focus on the audio board, and that's a position. Or just focus on the teleprompter, and that's a position. Or the control, the technical direction control panel, that's a position. And all you're responsible for as a student operator or even as a faculty staff operator is just this. And that we focus on and give them training on. Now we interconnect that with other things, and we talk about that as well. But part of the goal is to get students comfortable with any aspect of the technology, especially cameras. Like here's one of my senior student workers giving a class to a couple other students on camera. Camera operation at its simplest can be done by anybody. I have actually turned, I swear, I have turned to administrators and say, do you want to run camera? And a few of them have said yes. And so within a few minutes, I put them behind the wheel of a camera that's $50,000 worth of camera, you know, and I just say, okay, twirl this knob, twirl that thing, push that, push this, you're done. Here you know, listen to the director and she'll tell you what to do. And by putting people anybody, old folks, young folks, anybody, behind the wheel, you get this sort of thing, the smile on the face. And now, truthfully, she's also smiling because I'm taking her picture. She's like, I don't want to have my picture taken. But that's the other thing. You need to document the process. And occasionally, you get special little moments like that where you just see that aha moment in people's eyes. And it's just so wonderful. It makes me all happy and tingle as an educator. So, water break. Are there any questions by this time? Okay, good. All right. So, here's one of the lessons we learned that's not so fun. They built this. They started constructing this. I'm so sorry. We designed this. We started constructing this without staffing for it. And this was a problem that was raised at various levels. And it was always done like, well, that's a great idea. We'll let Robert handle it. Well, Robert has a day job called running video services, which is the facility downstairs. And so initially they were just thinking, well, I would run the facility upstairs too, in conjunction with the other two facilities that I run, and so on and so forth. And fortunately, my boss, John Farquhar, who's now director of AQS, said, well, first of all, no, this facility needs its own manager. It needs its own person to help design the philosophy, to get student workers involved, to get faculty and staff involved. I mean, there's just a variety of new aspects to this, especially if we're going to make it more than just a TV studio. And separately, he was able to push for and got funding for that new manager position. Unfortunately, that funding officially became available just about the time we got the keys to it. So we're a little bit behind, in my opinion, as far as things like scheduling and training and outreach, because you just need more help. You need a dedicated person to help put some of those things together. And that's one of the things that we're a little bit behind on. But we're trying to get caught up. And certainly we've started with training, and this is a lecture on Adobe Premiere, just as an example of that sort of effort. Plus we've been doing ad hoc training students and faculty that come into the facility and just randomly find it. But we have a lot more to do in that area in the near future. Here's another truism: be prepared to make changes in the plan. I threw this in there because one of the things that we didn't do right, and I'll admit this, is in designing those curtain rails that I showed you earlier, we only had one instead of two. Now, I knew we needed two, but I forgot to bring it up, and I admit that. And it's one of those things that everybody just didn't notice. Nobody noticed it. So when we have the curtain on the track, now we have these stringers that hold the set pieces up. Those have to be on the same track as the curtain. So essentially what you're looking at is one big, long, snaky thing of curtain and set pieces, all hung with care to be interwoven. It's a real pain, okay? So in the future, phase 2, we're going to add a second curtain rail because you just want to have set flats or other things as well as a curtain, because otherwise you'd see the green screen wall, which in some cases isn't terrible, but it isn't, it isn't as flexible as we had hoped. This is a shot of Suzanne Blaze, who I work with very closely, and she's a new media producer hired by the university to help come and coordinate some of these productions, such as Western Window, which is our weekly talk show that we produce and distribute. And the set you're actually seeing is for that TV show. It's our biggest production on campus on a regular basis, and it really shows. I mean, she really puts a lot of time and effort into it. So once we actually got the keys and we actually started doing stuff, one of the very first things that I pushed for were bigger productions, at least a few, to help give the thing some newsworthiness. So this is our Dean of Business, Craig Dunn, interviewing a fellow who's interested in sustainable business. I've forgotten his name off the top of my head, I'm so sorry, he's famous. If you know sustainable business, you may recognize him. But we did, even before we really fully knew all the bits and pieces of our own facility, we did a 2-camera interview with him, and it went really well, which I must say was a good thing, because it could have gone really badly, at which point I would have been not so happy. But as it turned out, it worked out really well, and by producing something that was important, that was meaningful early on, you know, it all gave us a certain amount of confidence and, quite frankly, some notoriety, which was good. We also did, literally just the day before I came up here to Northwest Met, this is our new president, Sabah Rendawa. Dr. Sabah Rendawa was the provost at Oregon State University in Corvallis, and as Raul will mention, in August or September, I'm not sure exactly when, he's going to be the new president of Western. We had him interviewed by a student named Al Dowling, who does hosting jobs for Western Window. And we created a 3-minute video in the studio at 2 p.m. And by 6 or 6:30 that evening, it was fully edited, finished, and posted online. One of the nice things about a multi-camera studio is you can record high-quality stuff and have it more or less edited on the fly using the switcher and create more or less finished products, if not fully finished, if you're doing something like news, live, or at least live-ish, to where it requires only a small amount of editing and then you post it. So this sort of thing, you know, is a big news event, and not only does it get the VIPs into the space, but in a meaningful way, versus just a walk and talk where you just show them and they look impressed and that's that. So, finally, and I don't know, this is tougher to do, but trust me, I'm a big fan of fun, all right? If it isn't fun, regardless of what it is, why do it? Now, that seems simplistic, but it works for me. And in creating these spectacles, if you will, we've always tried to instill a certain amount of fun in the process, especially since if it weren't for Suzanne and I, everybody else is a student worker. I have 13 student workers that work for me. She has anywhere between 6 and 8 interns. So there's a workforce of about 20 students in different roles. Partly they're doing it for a future career, partly they're doing it for future money. But we don't teach video production as a traditional career like I did. I was at the U of O and got my training there and graduated with a degree in television. Well, that's very nice. These kids, you know, are psychology majors, business majors, history majors, of theater arts, but they're traditional theater, not TV theater. And so making things fun not only helps keep them interested in something that they might not be thinking of as a career, but by seeing the more enjoyable aspects of it. I've had students that have graduated changing their minds and becoming into media production as a result of going through the 4 years, if I'm lucky, of working with me. So, you know, it works out really well, I think, for both of us. I get to create an atmosphere that keeps students coming back, and so literally I can have them for 4 to 5 years. Their whole college career, they work with me. Likewise, they're learning skills that are directly applicable to pretty much any job, because regardless of where they go and work, they're going to need media production skills and confidence in technology. So I think it's a win-win situation for both of us. So that's it. I mean, that's the basic bottom line. If you have questions, you can go see our website, which is really rudimentary. It needs to be really developed. And certainly, if I weren't presenting right now, I'd be working on that. So with that said, thank you very much.
So
Yes.
Bob, one question I've got is that I saw your own facility, and then I want to come and see your new facility, but I think it was really interesting on your campus, the excitement level that happened. You know, you were saying that you expected just a few people to show up, and then there's rooms packed with people. Was there like a project manager, or were you the project manager? Because when you get something like this going on, I was thinking of the session that I was just at, is that, you know, you kind of have to navigate this large group of people and all these people going in different directions and thinking, how did that come about and how did they get managed?
Wow, I'm being recorded.
Yes, you are.
Okay, so.
He will edit it, though. He said he's going to edit it.
Oh, that's so nice. Yes, he's going to trim the beginning and end, not the middle. Anyway, no, okay. Generally speaking, it was a really positive process. Obviously, there were some challenges because you had various interest groups that were interested in specific things. Like I said earlier, the 3 different deans. One was from the Interdisciplinary College, one was from the Journalism and Communication College, and one was from the Theater Arts College. And they all had special-ish ideas as to what those areas, those faculty needed. And we had to sort of compromise and combine and create and develop and so on and so forth. It didn't help that those different deans that started the process, 2 of them were gone by the time the actual process got started, and their replacements sort of inherited this, and they were like, well, I'm not really sure, you know, what they really wanted, and so on and so forth. So yes, it was a very interesting, behind-the-scenes, back-and-forth sort of horse trading going on. John Farquhar, my boss, was integral in this. Frank Roberts was also involved. There were a lot of discussions that I wasn't privy to, which, you know, I'm a junior manager, so, you know, I'm only way down here. There was a lot of talk at the dean's level. We had an executive council of deans. We had a variety of faculty and vice presidents at key positions. But the good news was, in conjunction with all this, everybody kept the sight of the end product, which was a flexible, functional user space for faculty and students that would be available 24/7. I didn't even talk about that. We designed this thing so that you could actually use it in the middle of the night on a weekend, if you felt like it. Now, we don't have that functional capability at this moment because we have policies and procedures to build it, but we actually designed this place to be as open-ended as possible, and by maintaining that mission, that vision, through all these different discussions, to some extent, that managed the project as much as any individual person. And then, as far as the nuts and bolts stuff, it wasn't a single person, unfortunately. It was me and Terry and John working our regular jobs and then managing this on the side. So that's part of the challenge of not having a project manager, is it could have easily gone south. I mean, we really had a tough time making sure that all the different contractors and deliveries and everything took place at the right time. And essentially what Terry was given was a certain amount of release time, in a sense, to focus on this. So if anything, he was the project manager on a day-to-day basis, and John was a project manager on a procedural and policy basis, and I was sort of the interface between the two.
Were you kind of the subject matter expert, for lack of a better term, because of your
in the meetings,
knowledge?
They would turn to me and say, well, Robert, you're the client. Here's a big important decision. What do you think? And I'd be in the room by myself because, as I mentioned earlier, the faculty and the staff and the other folks would drop off from meeting to meeting until finally it was just like me and Terry. And Terry didn't have an opinion. He turned to me and, oh, Robert, you're going to produce in here. What do you want? And so one of the bold moves that I made was, I didn't take a picture of it, but the green screen wall initially was going to go around both walls fully. And I thought, well, you know, if we stopped it a little bit early, we could actually have a white wall and have a white infinity wall separate from the green screen wall. So you could actually have 2 visual working areas. And they said, okay. And I said, make it so. And so they did. And it's worked out pretty well. But I just more or less, I mean, I asked John. I went to John. I said, hey, John, is this okay? He said, yeah, it sounds cool. And so, we went ahead and did it. But it wasn't in the original plans. And some of the detail work, in working with the architects, they would just turn to me or Terry and say, well, what do you guys want? And that was part of the rapport that we developed, is we not only got the approval from our bosses to do that sort of detail work, but we had the confidence in knowing that we were following the original plan to say those things instead of just saying, well, I really can't say, I have to go back. I mean, we did do that occasionally, but most of the time we kept the process moving along by just giving them an answer. Any other questions? Yes?
So can you talk a little bit more about, so the plan is to have it available 24/7?
Yes.
In the future? Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Well, in my opinion, and this is still very subject to change, we would give students a fob. We would train students in the the use of the production gear, and we would make one of them responsible. Or we would make a faculty person responsible, but in any case, one of them would get the key to the room, which is an electronic control key that's just a little fob thing. And they would be responsible. Now, of course, they would have my cell phone number, they would have other people's contact numbers, and they wouldn't be alone in a sense. But yet, from my days of going through the broadcast world as a student, I knew that if you had multiple classes in, let's say, studio production, let's say you had a class of 15, well, each of those 15 would be given assignments, and they'd need to use the studio to complete the assignment. So you'd have, one class taking up 3 hours, and then 15 students each needing 3 hours themselves, so there's 45 hours right there. And just that one class could take up every bit of time in a normal regular work day. And so by making it available, either through the students or the faculty, it just made sense. Plus, it's an expensive facility and you want to maximize the use. Unfortunately, what we haven't done is instituted the training and the security procedures necessary to make that actually happen. But essentially what that means is yours truly or somebody like me who does have a fob, and if you cajole me enough, yeah, I'll go in at night and do stuff. I'll go in on the weekends and do stuff. I mean, I do already, so it's just a matter of going upstairs and helping students do stuff, even in this sort of early phase where we don't have all the policies and procedures down. I want to see the university use it as much as possible this term. Yes?
I saw where you put in where you got the legislative funding for it, but
Mhm.
now how do you maintain it? Is it self-supportive, or do you have a pile of money for refresh the equipment, or?
Neither. We have no budget.
That's kind of how we do it too.
Yeah. I mean,
Wait for a bond or a grant or something.
well, I'm serious about this. I've been dropping hints with our foundation that this should be a named facility. That somebody big time should come in and name it and give us a foundational type grant or something. Because quite frankly, the facility itself was, for those of you that are interested in this sort of thing, it was a minor caps project of $1.5 million. We got another $250,000 from various internal sources on campus, but that was one-time build money. So it roughly costs about $1.7 million, $8-ish all in, not including staffing. And the staffing came through another rigmarole where basically it was an unfilled vacant position that was reassigned to be staff for the DMC. Okay, so that takes care of that. And we got a one-time student grant, we got a one-time student worker budget of $7,000. So at the end of this fiscal year, we have a staff person, no student worker money, and no budget. So that's part of my job, is finding the money, either through the foundation or the normal channels, or making it a self-support thing in the process or something. I don't know. We haven't. That's one of the bigger challenges, is that eventually it'll need a budget, but initially it'll be like many of the other things. It'll be started, and hopefully, like video services, the department I'm manager of right now will fund it, or ATUS will fund it, or something. We'll fund it internally if possible.
Well, you had the slide up there of the time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So this was 5 years, 6 years, 7
7, yeah.
years?
I mean, it's been in the process.
Three since they got the funding. 'Cause
Yeah.
they had to go
Yeah.
3 years to implement or totally integrate.
It's one of the favors, Listen, truly, we have a new president, we have a new CIO, and my boss is now my director. So I plan on sitting on somebody's knee like a kid at Santa time, asking, well, Robert, you've been good, what do you want? Well, money, but
Here's this Panasonic camera
Yeah.
you've been asking
yeah.
for.
I mean, seriously, part of the reason for doing big time productions, even with no money and no anything, if we get some notoriety, hopefully that'll lead to money. If we can prove the concept, get the faculty in, make the case that we're a real necessity, even though they've built the building and put the money into the building, now we have to make the case for making the building infrastructure a line item in somebody's budget.
Will you be responsible for producing new and different exciting content now as a result of your new and exciting digital media center?
Well, sort of. My main goal is to help facilitate other people making new and exciting content.
Yeah.
And so the major charge that I've been given, and again, it's very similar to a makerspace, is make people happy to produce their stuff in it and get them successful. And if that means doing it for them or helping them do it, that's a part of the job. But primarily it's getting them empowered and verifying that they're doing it successfully.
Yeah, I know when I moved back in 1999 from Chicago to Idaho to Lewis and Clark State College, the first thing that I noticed, I inherited a TV studio, a big TV studio, and production staff we had to develop programming just to keep selling the concept of it's okay for us to have this studio. And I was lucky enough to reach out to Idaho Public Television at the time and say, can I help develop content? And you guys put it on for us, and they were able to work with us.
Yeah. If nothing else, if nobody came through the door with ideas, I would create the ideas, and certainly I have. But fortunately, we've already had students and faculty coming forward with ideas. So that frankly keeps me busy enough right there. But if the well runs dry, then sure, I'll produce it. I mean, we got ideas all over the place. It's just like Legos. I mean, you just put it together in whatever shape you want, and then when you're done, you tear it apart and put it again. Yeah. Any other questions?
I just want to say I agree with the Beverly statement.
Okay.
I
Thanks.
just like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a big proponent in media as like refrigerator magnets. Instead of thinking it in these sort of monolithic terms, it's just little bits of video that you can move around and make into stuff and have fun with doing it. And the more tools we give students, the better. And I don't know, quite frankly, I think we ought to teach media literacy like we do English as a required course for all students. So that's my soapbox. Well, if you want a card, feel free to come up and get one. You're welcome to come up if you're in Bellingham to see the new facility. We also have video online. Unfortunately, we don't have it linked to our webpage yet, but in the near future, i.e. once I leave this conference, that's one of the jobs I have to do is start putting that together. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Kind of went through the process of design and building one at our college.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't really get any funding, so we don't have to bring it.
Right.
And that